All right, good morning, everyone. Okay, thank you again, Max, for covering yesterday. We are on Sadi Gimel, 93A. We are like 10 blot away or so. Okay. Just a little over that. Okay, so the Gemara has been discussing this question that Abaye posed, that do walls create stringencies? Abaye was very troubled by something that was said earlier, and he questioned this. How could it possibly be it would come out that walls create stringencies? And that was a question that he asked. And the Gemara goes on all these questions asking, hey, wait a second, there are other cases where walls do create stringencies, so why are you so bothered? And the Gemara is dealing with all those questions. Do walls actually create stringencies? So we're 93A1, Tzadi Gimel, Amud Aleph, in the art scroll. We are in the third column, a few lines down in the regular daf. So Amrle Rabba Bar Rav Chanan Labai. Do we not have cases where a partition does cause prohibitions? For example, Vatanya, Baya Shechetzu Makora V'Chetzu and Makora. So let's say you have a house that is half roofed and half unroofed. So behind me, you will see that there is a house. There is a house over here. I'll put it like this. Okay, and basically half of it is roofed. Half of it has a roof and half of it does not have a roof, right? Pretty simple. Half the roof is missing, okay? Or it has whatever, half of it does not have a roof. So, says the Gemara, says the Brisa, Gefana Mikan, okay, if there are vines growing over here, if let's say these are vines, okay, I should have made this a little like this, I don't know, whatever vines look like, those are my vines. There are vines over here, you'd be allowed to plant wheat and other greens over here, and there's no issue of kilayim, okay? However, the Brisa continues, if you go ahead, but if you were to go ahead and add an extra wall over here, a mechitza, a wall, right? Then this would be forbidden. You would not be allowed to plant under this, okay? So the Gemara says, clearly you see a wall is creating a stringency, right? This is another, so again, Abaye was bothered. Hey, walls never create stringencies, stringencies. He says, what are you talking about? This is a case where, had this wall not been here, this would be fine. Planting one type of produce over here and vines over here, but now that you add this wall, then it does go ahead and create a stringency. So Gemara says, no, Amrle hasam silk mechitzasu. The reason, he says, once again, it's a similar answer to the ones we saw before, and that is that it's not the extra wall that's causing the prohibition, it's that prior to this wall being here, then what did you have? You have this virtual wall that goes down. Once you put this wall over here, then you've just removed this wall, right? By adding this wall over here, you've removed this because the only way this wall works over here is when it ends over here. But now that you've added this wall, you've removed the wall, and that's why you can't plant over here. So again, it's not the added wall, it is the additional wall that removed the other one, and that's why it's usher. So again, Abaye points out, Abaye's question still stands, hey, we never find a case where walls actually create stringency. So we're just going to ask another question. The second column. Shachle Rav Labai Biad Rav Shmaya Bar Ze'era. And he says, Lister, don't we have a case where a partition caused prohibition? But we have a brisa. There are cases where a wall in a vineyard causes a leniency, and cases where it causes stringency. Ketzad, what is the example? Let's say you have a vineyard that is planted up to the base of a partition. In other words, you have a vineyard planted up to a wall. Then you're allowed to plant on the other side of the wall. You're allowed to plant greens, you're allowed to plant grains. In other words, there's no distance needed, right? So if you have a wall, very straightforward, you have a wall in the middle, you can plant vineyards on one side, and you can plant grains on the other side, even though there's not significant space between the two of them, okay? Shilu ain't mechitza. Had there not been a wall there, marchik arba amos v'zorea, you would go ahead and leave a space of 4 amos between the vines and then the next type of thing, right? So if you have a wall, this is a leniency, right? So you have vines on one side, you have a thin wall, and then you're allowed to plant something on the other side. Had there been no wall, you'd have to have a larger gap, 4 amma gap between each type of species. Okay, fine. That is this is a case of vineyard that caused a leniency. What is the case of astringency? Okay, if the vineyard was removed 11 amos from the wall. Okay, if a vineyard is removed, you have a wall 11 amos away. Lo yavi lezera sham. You are not allowed to go ahead and place any other produce, any other type of species between the wall and the vineyard. Okay, meaning like this. Basically, if you have a wall over here, sorry.
The problem is it's bigger than 10.
The problem is it's bigger than.
It shows 11.
Well, we'll see where the 11 comes from. Basically, you have like this. You have. Okay, this is your wall over here, and then you have a vineyard, your vineyard's over here. Okay, again, there's a really terrible vineyard. I don't know how are they making vineyards. Okay, so you'd have to have a distance of 11 if you want to go ahead. Let's say this is, if you have If you have 11, then let's say this is 11, then you could plant something over here. Okay, then you plant something here. But if there isn't, right? But let's say there is no wall over here. How far would you have to go ahead? If you remove this wall, right? How far would you have to go ahead and plant from the vineyard? 4 amos, right? So, whoa. You see, by adding a wall, if there's no wall, all you need is 4 amos. Now that you put the wall over here, we say, I need a distance of 11 amos. So clearly, what do you see? A wall creates a stringency, right? We'll explain why in a minute that you need that actual wall. But yeah, you got the basic question right. If there's no wall over here, all you need to do is distance 4 amos. Now that you put a wall over here, you now need to distance 11 amos before you start planting. Okay, that's a lot. So what's going on? So the Gemara says, before we start addressing that question, Amarle Abai says, wait a second, according to your reasoning, why are you asking a question from a Brisa? Ask a question from Mishnah, which is a very similar law. It's not taught in a Mishnah. Karachas hakerem, a clearing in a vineyard. So what does a clearing in a kerem mean? Like this. Let's just quickly draw this. We're really using this a lot. Okay, fine. So clearing in a kerem means like this. Let's say you have a vineyard. This whole thing is a vineyard. Okay, there's all planting. Okay, so the question is, right, if there is a gap, if there is a gap in between, karach literally means like a bald spot. If there's a significant amount of we might use yours today. Let's see. Okay. So if there is a significant, no, not yet. If there is a significant bald spot in between, then you'd be allowed to plant other things. But if it's too small, then it's just going to be considered part of the vineyard, right? So that's the point. The point is like, right, this is vineyard. So the question is, how big of a bald spot do you need in the middle? How big of an empty spot do you need in the middle to be seen as like an independent space? Okay? So the Gemara says, karachas hakerem, a clearing in a vineyard. Beishami omrim esr ba'arba amos. You need to have 24 amos. We're going to explain where all these amos come from in a moment. Beisilah omrim sheishes re ama. Okay, Beisilah says 16 amos. Okay, that is one debate, and will be explained in a moment. Why not 4? Well, we'll see. We'll see where that comes from. Mechol hakerem. Okay, let's say you have a scenario where you have a wall. Now you're gonna have another debate between Meisham and Beisilah, where you have a wall over here, and a person wants to plant. You have a vineyard over here, right? And you want to plant other stuff. So the question is, how much space is needed between these two things? So that's called Mechol HaKerem, right? The perimeter of the vineyard. So Beishamei Omrim Sheishes Re'ama, you need to have 16 amos, must be cleared, and then you're allowed to plant. Beisol Omrim Shteim Es Re'ama, you have 12 amos. Okay, now the Gemara is going to explain all this, and then we'll come back to the question. Okay, Ve'ezu Karechas HaKerem, what does it mean, a clearing in the vineyard? Kerem Shechar Vem Se'iso, a vineyard that has been destroyed in the middle, right? That's like the picture on top. There's destruction in the middle. Im Ein Sham Sheishes Re'ama, if there isn't 16 amos, we're explaining the position of Beisil over here. Lo Yavi you're not allowed to bring other species, other seeds there. Okay, so Hayusham Sheishes Re'ama. However, if you have 16 amos, no sin lo kidei avodaso v'zerez amoser. Then you leave space for the work area. Okay, and then you go ahead and you plant the rest. Okay, so what does this mean? So we're going to explain the position of Beisil over here. So what this means is, if you have 16 amos, you're allowed to plant. Why? Because what you have is you need to have 4 amos. That's still, meaning when you have a vineyard, you're working around the vineyard. You walk around the vineyard. There has to be a perimeter around the thing that you're working on. So we need 4 amos over here, where on each side, where a person's able to work, right? They can work over here. So there's 4 amos over here. 4 amos over here, and this allows them. This is not to scale, fine. Then you go ahead. This allows them to work on the vineyard over here, right? Because the way you work on a vineyard is go around the vineyard, not in the vineyard, around the vineyard. So first you need 4 amos, and then you have right. So then you have and then you have. Did I mess it up? Yeah. Okay. Right. And then you have 8 amos of farmable area over here. That is considered significant enough space on its own, according to Beis Hillel, and therefore you'd be allowed. This is going to be because the reason you need a larger area, Max, to your question, is that since we're in the middle of a field, we need it to be a significant field on its own in order to be seen as a distinct place. If it's a very small little place in the middle, we look at it, we say, oh, you're planting in the middle of a vineyard. But if there's a big enough gap, okay, so for 8 amos, right, the 8 amos would be a big enough gap, plus 4 amos over here for this space, 4 amos for this space, then you'd be allowed to plant in this space because it's seen as a significant enough space. Okay? That's Beis Shammai obviously holds you need double that amount. Okay, that's not yet our question. Okay, but then the Gemara says, Ezo Michal Kerem, this is where we're going. What's the perimeter of the vineyard? Beina Kerem Legeder, there has to be space between the vineyard and the fence. Okay, Shem Ein Sham Shteim Esrei Ama. Okay, if there's not going to be 12 amos, then lo yavi zelo sham, you're not allowed to bring seed there. Hayusham shtem esrei ama, if there is 12 amos there, no sin lo k'dei avodaso v'zeresa moser. Then you have to give again 4 amos for the work area for the vineyard. Okay, so meaning, let's say in this case you give 4 amos amos over here, okay, so that you could work on the vineyard. We're this way, okay, and then what? How many amos is it again? It is right, 12 amos, right. And then you have an additional 8 amos over here. You have an additional 8 amos over here. Fine. And then you're allowed to be planting over here. Okay? So 4 amos for the work, and then another 8 amos over here where you're going to be working, where you're going to be planting. So once again, over here, what do you see in this case? Bottom line is, what do you see? That if there is no wall over here, you wouldn't need these dimensions. You would just say 4 amos away, I could just start planting. Now that there's a wall, I have to say no. Only if there's 16 amos, then I'm allowed to plant. But if there's 12 amos, then I'm allowed to plant. If there's not, then I wouldn't be allowed to plant. Once again, a wall is creating a stringency. You with me? Right? In other words, again, this is the case we're asking from now. Abai is saying, why are you asking from the Brisa? This Mishnah case is also problematic according to you. Because really, if there was no wall over here, you just say 4 amos and plant no matter what. Now that there's a wall, I have to say, it has to be this much space between it. So what do you see? You see a wall creates a stringency. Make sense? Yeah? So what does the Gemara answer? Ella hasam lav hanutayim. The reason these cases of walls are actually you need more space is because el dechol arba amos legabe kerem avodas kerem is because again you need 4 amos for the vineyard itself. Okay, legabe geder kiven delom is daran afkurim afkerluhu because the fact that there is basically planting next to a wall. What happens when you walk down the street? Sometimes there's like a tree planted, and you walk right next to, like sometimes they do this, like cities do this to be fancy, but what happens? They plant trees right by the sidewalk, and what happens to sidewalks? They buckle or crack, right? Because bottom line is that the roots start growing and it ruins everything next to it. So an intelligent person so the assumption is that people are not going to plant within 4 amos. Okay, within 4 amos of the wall, you typically do not plant. That's not about walls being more machmer. It's not like a halachic reality. It's practically, people will not plant over here because it's going to ruin this wall. And therefore you need more space because people just always, with assumptions, people are just not going to plant over there because of the wall. Not that the wall creates like a halachic stringency. It's that because it's understood that people don't plant next to the wall for 4 amos because if they would, then it would ruin the wall. Therefore, in this case, you need to have 12 amos in total because 4 amos over here is being used over here. 4 amos is for the wall, okay? And then you can plant in between because that's practically where people are going to plant. But it's not that the wall is like creating a stringency, it's just that no one plants next to walls. And that would be the same answer for the Bryce's question where, you see the wall creating a stringency. It's not creating a stringency, it's that practically people don't plant next to walls. So once again, Abaye points out, so let's just read it inside, sorry. Since the 4 amos next to the wall, they're not suitable for planting. So the owner basically says, I'm not planting there. The the area in between that, if there are 4 amos, that's good. If there aren't 4 amos, it's not enough to be considered a significant area, and it'll just be considered subsumed with the vineyard itself. Bottom line is, Abaye shows that partitions themselves do not cause stringency, and therefore his question that he asked on them stands, and the Gemara leaves his question unanswered. Again, the question was asked about an earlier case, where the Gemara introduced the Amoraim introduced a case where a wall was going to create a stringency. Abaye says, we never see walls creating stringencies. They asked a bunch of questions. Hey, you do see walls that create stringencies? And he answered all those questions. No, none of those cases were the walls creating the stringencies. It was all either removal of walls that was creating the stringency, or this particular case where the wall itself is creating a scenario where again, where the wall itself is it's just like a technical thing where you need to have extra space, but the wall itself is not creating a stringency per se. Abaye's question is left unanswered. Okay, now we're going to go back to, we had this principle before where you have, we had the case of the get and the case of all the stuff that Max taught you yesterday, and basically we had this concept where you have the big courtyard going into the small courtyard. We said the big courtyard is kind of seen, the small courtyard is kind of seen as like almost like an annex to the big courtyard. Okay, so with that in mind, the Gemara said one other thing we have to know, and that is a karpef. What is a karpef? So we've talked about karpefos a couple of times. Karpefos are typically created. One of the classic times that karpefos are created is a person's traveling on Shabbos. They get stuck. So what do? They put up a basic boundary around them, but not proper walls, not good walls, not walls that are so strong, and nor are they walls that are halachically have so much significance. They're walls where you either have things, the slats going vertically or horizontally, and basically because of that, typically you will only have 2,000 yards of base of Saim to walk. Okay, in a scenario where you have a shayara, you have at least 3 people situated in one of these places. Let's say you have a caravan of people traveling together, and there's 3 people in one of these places. There, Chazal said, we don't have those same space limitations. We give a person much more space. Okay, as a leniency, because obviously people are stuck and they're stuck as a group, we'll give them much more space. Okay, that's the basic principle of a karpef. Okay, says the Gemara. You have 3 karpefos side by side. Okay, 3 partitions side by side. The 2 outer ones are fenced off. The middle one is not fenced off. So what it's referring to is the picture you have in the middle. It's the opposite of the Chevrolet thing that I have painted, drawn behind me. Right? So it's the opposite. It's think of like a barbell. I don't know. Yeah? Is that a good example? Yep. Yeah? Good. Okay. So basically, right, don't look at the picture. Don't look at the picture behind me. Look at the picture on your Gemara. So basically, it's narrow in the middle. That means the person in the middle is not fenced off, and the people on the outside are fenced off. Okay? And each one of these fenced-in areas have a person living in it. So nasa kishayara, v'noslam kol tzarkan. We treat it like a caravan, and then we allow them to extend their space well beyond, beyond two sa. In other words, they're not limited by how much space they can have. They could be, much larger. Okay, why? Because vaday emtzai megufaf. Sorry. Why is that? The reason it is because the 2 people on the outer ones, the outer parts of the barbell, right? Each of them kind of go together in the middle, right? Because again, think of the person on the right. The person on the right, he lives over there by himself. But he, as we saw yesterday, right? The middle karpef is kind of seen as connected to him, right? In other words, he opens up into the middle karpef. Right? It's kind of like that annex that we saw. If you have like 9 people in the big one and 1 person in the small one, it's going to work, right? So basically the guy in the outer one is connected to the one in the middle one. And the person on the left is also connected to the middle one. So in the middle, how many people do you have? 3. Because the 2 people in the outer ones are seen as connected to the one in the middle, and therefore there are 3 people in the middle. And once you have 3 people together, then you are not limited by the 2 sa. With me?
Just the difference is that the one in the middle is smaller.
It's not just that it's smaller. No. Not just that it's smaller. I don't want to do this. Okay. It's not just smaller. Right? It's the same case that we were talking about yesterday, where you have this, okay, and then it's like this, okay. So what happens is these people, this wall. Remember, we said this is all fenced in, and this is seen as like almost an extension of this, and this is seen as an extension of this. Okay. So there's person over here, there's person over here, and there's person over here. So this person, since this area is seen as connected, we treat it as if this person's over here, because this is all really connected, right? We treat this person as if he's over here because it's all connected. So how many people are in this place? 3 people. The 3 people together. And once there are 3 people together, we have that leniency that there's no space limits, and therefore it can be much larger, right? It's not just that it's larger; it says that this one is walled in, and this is not walled. And this is seen as walled in. This scene is not walled in. It's almost seen as like the entrance or annex to it, and therefore there's all 3 people together. Yeah? Okay. But the flip side, okay? Let's say you have let's say you have, and now we're going to get to the Chevrolet case, right? You have the middle case where it's walled in, and the 2 outer ones are not fenced in, and there's an individual in each one. Then each karpef only has 2 base, right? In this case, what do you have? You have a person over here. You have a person over here. You have a person over here. So this person is seen as if he's going this way, right? Because this is the big one opening up into the small ones. He's going over here, right? The walled-in one going into the small ones. So you have 2 people together, or 2 people together, but you never have any space where there are 3 people together. Make sense? Right? Okay. So this case clearly will not get the extra extensions. Rather, that's all seen as separate, because at the very most you have 2 in each side. That's not going to help us. We need to have 3. Okay. Now we're going to get a little more complicated, or just not that complicated, but just different variations. Let's say you have an individual in each one. Okay. So let's say now you have 2 people over here. Okay. Okay. I'm not trying to not open it, I just don't have the time. 2 people over here, right? So now what's the halacha, right? 2 people over here, 1 person over here, 1 person over here. Again, we need to have 3 people in order for you to get the leniency they need to see as 3 people together in order to get the leniency. Now, what's the 2 tzadim? On the one hand, you should say, well, it's very simple. 2 people go over here. Now you have, right, because this is open, this is the annex to this. or this to annex this. So if two people would go over here, or two people would be going over here, it would work, right? So on the one hand, you say, oh, you have three people together. At the same time, what could happen? One goes each way. Thank you, right? At the same time, one go each way, and then you only have two people on each side, and that doesn't necessarily help you. So it says the Gemara, let's say you have a person in each outer one, and two people in the middle. What's the halacha? Do we say that since they go in each direction, and if they were to go in each direction together in either direction, then you'd have three, and therefore you would be able to say that you give them as much space as needed. Okay? Odilma, do you say chad lahachanafik? The chad lahachanafik. Do you say that no, like Jesse's just said, that we could each one of them could go in one direction, and then you'd each have two on each side, and that wouldn't help you. You need to have three. Okay, if you want to say chad lahachanafik, bechad lahachanafik, even if you want to be strict and say that no, maybe you're right, like Jesse said, that one's going to go this way, one's going to go that way. What happens in the case where there are two in each of the outer ones, okay, and one in the middle, right? So now let's switch this up. So now you have a case where there are one person in the middle and two, just bear with me, okay, two over here. Do you see it? Look closely. Okay, there's two people. One of them is a little bit emaciated. Okay, so there are two people in each one, okay, and there's one person in the middle, right? So this case should be much more simple, right? On the one hand, you could say, well, if they go this way, there'll be three. If he goes this way, there'll be three. And therefore, we should give them all that space. That sounds like the more straightforward one, right? So do we say... okay, hachavadai ilahacha nafik tlasahava ilahacha nafik tlasahava. In no matter which way they go, there's going to be three occupants in one of them, and therefore we should give them the full amount. Odilma emer lahacha nafik emer lahacha nafik. Since we don't know, meaning Shabbos, the guy starts in the middle, and we don't know which way the guy's going to go. So what could you say? You say, well, since we don't know which way the person's going to go, we therefore say that since we don't know which direction the person's going to go, we cannot look at any part of the carpet as having three occupants, and therefore we'll have to be strict and not give them all that space. Those are the questions that are asked. The Gemara says, what's the answer? V'hilchasa bayan lekula. All these questions, we're always going to rule leniently. Again, we're talking about Eruvin. In general, the Eruvin, we are going to take the more lenient approach, and therefore the Gemara says, yes, at the end of the day, all good questions, but we're going to go with the lenient approach, and therefore we will rule more leniently and assume in all these cases, if there's one possibility to say there are three in either side, we will go with that approach and say there are three in that side, and that is what we'll stop for today. Have a wonderful day. Chodesh Tov. Chodesh.